Hey everyone, getting a little bit of a late start today. I got all my other work done. A good bit of freelancing I had to get done today, and even more to get done tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. It's good to have some extra work going, but it's a lot of work. So we're getting an evening start on NaNoWriMo, and I need to make it to 25,000 words. I'm currently at 22.6, so I have most of 2,500, which is my daily word count goal anyway. So I need to get get moving along with this particular story. So we're looking at Rise Again, a sci-fi novel by Jay Wilburn. Now we are on chapter 10, I believe. Yeah, so I need to get going on this. I'm going to reread what I have. Let's see, that's about 3, 4 pages. So I'm going to reread chapter 10 up to this point and then kind of continue off of there. So, oh well, that makes sense then, Rick said to Trey on the couch. Will you be leaving soon for another world? I looked at Patrick, who stood with his arms crossed. He had at least put the gun away. I wished he hadn't brought it from the last world. I wish we'd stayed in that house until he was healed from any infection. Trey said the system has to recharge. Oh, cool, Rick said. As Trey started explaining the technology, I could tell Trey didn't get that Rick didn't believe any of this, but was going along because he was afraid we were going to hurt him. Alright, I'm going to break here and create a different section. Alright, so Trey was saying, and that's how it charges. Let's say that's how it's powered. That's how it's powered. The nanites gather solar power locomotion, heat, background, radiation, and more. The technology obviously came from somewhere more advanced, so even the scientists studying it in my world didn't fully understand it before I slipped the first time. Does it power faster if you stay in the sunlight or move around more? Trey asked. Not Trey asked. Come on now, get your story straight. Rick asked. If I can't keep track of the characters, how to expect anyone else to? Alright. Trey said, not that I can tell. Maybe it takes a different amount of power on some trips than others. I'd imagine it would be a tremendous amount of power, more than solar can produce in my world yet. Trey nodded and said, "It's amazing technology, obviously." Probably need a comma there, but I'll take care of it later. Alright. How were you chosen for the mission? Alright, now we'll continue on from there. I was barely a research assistant back then, 20 years old. Unbelievable. I've spent more of my life traveling between worlds than I spent in the one I was born in. I noticed Trey didn't really answer the question. I'd noticed that a lot since Patrick pointed it out to me several worlds ago. Okay. Why did you leave? Rick almost sounded curious in an honest way. Say, with his questions. Okay. Trey took a deep breath. Trey took a deep breath. I'd been traveling with him a while. I'd heard this story in bits and pieces. The tech came from another world, one more advanced than mine. The stuff was stripped out of the traveler's body, studied and replicated. Then we started experimenting. I didn't have security clearance, but I got into the program anyway. Then the testing started. I found myself to drift between timelines, between worlds. It's sort of nanotech. It is part biology, part biological. Trey paused. His eyes always darted to the corners of whatever room we were in when he discussed this part of his past. Did something go wrong, Rick asked. Is that why you can't get home? Trey stared a million miles away, but then came back with a smile that was a little too wide. I might have sped up the tests and jumped before everything was ready. I doubt they would have ever figured out a guidance system. The traveler who died in our world didn't appear to have one. I was trying to escape a world that had long ago descended into tyranny. In more than 20 years, Rick trailed off. Say it, Trey said. You haven't found a better world yet? Trey looked away from Rick, then he Okay, let's change this. We'd used averted. It wasn't my intention to edit tonight, but recapturing the chapter so I can finish it is going to be helpful. Then he averted his gaze from Patrick and I. Okay. That's a tough question. I've stayed in a few worlds for a while, back when I was traveling alone, but it's hard to explain what was wrong. Maybe I'm too much of a perfectionist. Patrick snorted at that, but didn't say anything. I wasn't sure what his reaction meant. Trey asked, "Do you have anything to eat?" "Not much," Rick said, blinking like he'd come out of a fugue. I was on my way to pick up a few groceries when I was interrupted. "Sorry," Trey said. Rick made a face and showed his teeth a little. "Sure. We can try to make something out of what you've got on hand, Patrick said. You might be surprised what we survived on in other worlds. Rick chewed at his lip and then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a square of black glass. It was fairly thin. Patrick's hand went to his own coat pocket. I grabbed his arm to keep him from pulling the weapon, if that's what he had planned. Patrick asked, "Is that a communicator?" Rick dropped it on the little glass table by his knees. It landed on top of his discarded mask, but still made a loud thump. "Sorry, I wasn't trying anything. I was just going to order some food. It can be delivered to the house here." Trey picked up the device. "And the delivery man?" Patrick asked. "We're in a pandemic. I can order without talking to anyone. They'll charge my card and leave it on the step right outside. No contact with anyone, I swear," Rick said. Trey said, This is an airsoft? What?" Trey looked up from the device and handed it back to Rick. Patrick tensed, but I gripped his arm tighter. "Stop being a bastard, Pat." He chuckled at me and relaxed by degrees. Trey waved his hand over the device and said, "An airsoft, like a phone you carry around in your pocket, but it does a lot more than just make calls." "Oh yeah," Rick said. We call it a phone. An airsoft is like a fake gun thing in this world." Rick closed his eyes and shook his head before opening them again. Airsofts are a lot bigger in my world," Trey said. "Well, you said that was 20 plus years ago. Maybe they've advanced." Trey stared at the wall with his mouth hanging open, like he'd never considered his world might have moved on without him. "Why do you call it an airsoft?" Rick asked. "It was made by Microsoft. It sends signals through the air. Airsoft, see?" "Yeah," Rick shook his head. "We have a Microsoft here too. The iPhones were made by Apple." "Why is it called an iPhone? Because of video?" Rick thought a moment and then said, "No, I, as in the letter I." "What does the I stand for?" Rick was the one who lost focus then. "I don't really know. I'm sure I was told, but I don't remember." "What year did you leave your world?" 1996, Trey said. "Who was the president?" "Bill Clinton. He was running for re-election." "Here he won." Trey shrugged. "He might have won there too." "Have you considered this might be your world just 24 years later?" Okay. There was a pause. I heard oh no, I shouldn't need to hear it. A dog barked twice, but the road outside was otherwise deserted. No cars, no foot traffic. I didn't recall seeing anyone else as we forced poor Rick to take us to his house. Say home. She would probably say home. All right. "You didn't have airsofts," Trey said. Rick hit his forehead with his palm. Right. They ran through a list of presidents from their respective worlds that seemed to match up as well as they both could remember. Rick added a couple more after 1996 in his world. Trey had never heard of Obama and couldn't remember if the first George Bush had a son or not in his world. "Donald Trump," Trey asked. "I wonder if that's the same Donald Trump from my world. If so, they followed very different paths." "It could be the same guy," Rick said. His rise was unlikely, to say the least. Trey smiled with one corner of his mouth. "Well, in my world he ran casinos in New Jersey." Rick laughed. It made me feel good to hear it. It might have had a little bit of an edge to it, but at least he could laugh. "Same here. Well, not exactly the same. He built casinos, but they went bankrupt." Let me have him put "I think." He's not a big student of history. "I think." "Gambling wasn't legalized in New Jersey after he built the hotels." "No gambling in New Jersey?" Trey asked. "Why would anyone go then?" Rick laughed again. "Yeah, I don't know." "Is he a tyrant?" Trey asked. This seemed to sober Rick up. I thought he was insulted, but then he finally said, "He's a real bad guy in my opinion. He's running for re-election, and I really hope he loses for the good of the country. He's He's not the right guy to be president. Half the country, almost half, seems to love him, though. The pandemic has been handled badly. The economy is hurting right now, and there is unrest everywhere. He sides with fascists. Trey leaned forward as Rick spoke. Patrick said, "If he can lose an election, he isn't much of a tyrant. We've been to worse worlds. We don't know how bad this one really is yet," I said. "Was it a tyranny before he was elected?" Trey asked. Rick took a breath. "I really loved the last president. I guess almost half the country hated him, though. I don't know if Trump is a real tyrant, a real technical tyrant. Technically, I mean. He'd like to be, but the Constitution keeps stopping him." "The Constitution didn't stop the slow march of tyranny in my world," Trey lamented. Rick said, "It's a mess. I want to believe he will leave office when he loses, but I don't know. He separates kids from their parents and keeps them in cages when they cross the border, but he's not allowed to block anyone on Twitter. He tried to undermine the ACA, but couldn't overturn it." Trey said, "I don't know what those last couple things mean, but he sounds like a dictator to me." Rick stared at the floor and his mouth moved in and out of various shapes. "Yeah, I don't know. What was it like? What was your world like?" "I don't think anyone would say this one was a dictatorship in the 90s. Trey took a deep breath and explained, "It may have been the climate. It may have been global warming. That was the excuse they used to start restricting freedoms. Well, hell, freedoms were restricted for over a century, but it sped up in my time. Civilization takes 250 years to collapse. I read somewhere. Unless you got global warming, and then you can collapse it a lot faster. Climate change is real." Rick said. "I'm not sure, but I believe he was angry." Trey met eyes with him and locked in. "I thought it might turn ugly." "It might turn ugly." I couldn't hold back. Patrick and Trey at the same time. But Trey surprised me. Of course, it's real. You can see it happening right in front of your eyes. Now, Rick seemed surprised. Oh, okay. I misunderstood you. Okay. I misunderstood you. I thought, well, see here, we have people who deny climate change, global warming. We call it climate change. Now, the same people who support Trump actually. Trey nodded and then shrugged. I don't know what there is to deny. You can see the equatorial countries turning into deserts and refugees scurrying in everywhere like rats, bringing crime and disease with them. Islands vanish, coasts flood, then the resource wars start. Why would people fight each other for food and water if the world wasn't drying up under them? Right? Rick swallowed and said, "Wow, it must be going faster in your world than in ours." Rick swallowed. Wow, it must be going faster in your world than in ours. I mean, we are seeing signs of some of that. Rick swallowed and said, "Wow, it must be going fast in your world than in ours." I mean, we are seeing signs of some of that, but most of those things are just predicted now. Trey whistled and said, "Count yourself lucky because..." Not count yourself licky, I don't even know what that means. Count yourself lucky because once it starts, it accelerates and only gets worse. And you'll have to watch your government you'll see real power grabs then. It was like that in the 90s in your world. Rick asked. Trey said, all right, let me get through these. Smaller, resource starved countries collapsed into chaos and civil war. Larger countries, smaller resource starved countries collapsed into chaos and civil war. Larger countries tried to move into the voids and ended up fighting each other and warlords as well. The United States continued its imperialist tendencies and made themselves the police and the judge of the world. Chilling. Rick said. Trey laughed as if Rick had made a joke. Trey laughed as if Rick had made a joke. I didn't get it. Trey continued. Crisis was the excuse. That's always the excuse of empires taking freedoms. My space bar is getting weird on me. Sometimes it doesn't want to pop down when I hit it. Alright. Travel restrictions, searches without warrants, everything was surveilled. That is not even close. Everything was surveilled, even when they got caught doing it. Everything was surveilled, and even when they got caught doing it, nothing happened. Detention without trials. People just disappearing. Crimes going unsolved. Race wars that burned down cities. Okay, I had trouble finding my cursor. Alright, race wars that burned down cities. They they would shut off the internet and sometimes other communications and media during elections. All right. They started doing it during crises. Whenever they claimed some terror group was planning something, but no evidence was ever offered. Eventually, we were always in crisis. That sounds terrible, Trey. You make me appreciate my world a little more. Trey shrugged and leaned back on the cushions of Rick's couch. I'm gonna have her say sofa. Rick's sofa. And like telling that story made him tired. Okay, I think I may have figured out what's going to happen in some of the future chapters. Alright. Trey shrugged and leaned back on the cushions of Rick's sofa, like telling the story made him tired. Trey shrugged and leaned back on the cushions, like the story made him tired. To be honest, that's why I left with the technology before it was ready. Rick leaned forward. Deep lines formed across his forehead. He rubbed his face pretty hard with both hands and then splayed his fingers, showing only his eyes as he sighed loudly into his own hands. I could hear a clock ticking somewhere in the house. I assume it was a clock. I've learned that things that have things that had an obvious explanation in my world may not be the source of things I think I see, hear, or witness in new worlds. The differences range from subtle to extreme, and I feel like an alien everywhere we land. Patrick pulled the outside was silent. All that existed was the four of us in poor Rick's living room. Patrick pulled away from my grip, reminding me that I'd still been holding his arm. Rick Helms, how do you order food with your communicator? Alright, so let's make this chapter 11. Alright, I'm going to pull the title here because it's still the same world. V, enter. Okay. Get that together down there because that's throwing me off. Okay. Alright, it's the same world. Alright. I watched Avalon, Trey, and this new guy eat the Italian food. I'd been starving as we waited and expected forces to burst through the door from whatever signal Rick Helms had sent them. But the food was placed on the stoop. Now let's just say doorstep. Doorstep, just as he said it would. Just as he said it would be. For some reason that made all the more suspicious to me. I looked out the curtain again and still saw nothing. Still suspicious. I just couldn't imagine a man in his position being handed a communicator we knew nothing about and not sending word for help. But that might have been exactly what he had done. Nothing. I wasn't a private inquisitor any longer, but it was hard to shed that mantle. Every new world was a mystery, and mysteries were dangerous. We would always be in danger. The food was acidic. It wasn't bad, but every world seemed to punch up the flavors of things more than my world ever did. Most worlds had brighter colors, smaller walls, fewer explosions, and happier people. There were obvious exceptions, but the fact that food tasted bolder in a world in the midst of a plague, and the only worlds more drab than mine were war-torn lands full of poison and radiation did not speak highly of where I came from. Patrick. Evelyn's voice startled me, and I dropped gauze curtains. Come try these garlic knots. They are amazing. In a moment, I said, let my first round settle a bit. They had discussed other types of food. Evelyn had grown to love Chinese food. Rick discussed something called Thai. He lost me when he described it as spicier. He mentioned sushi too, but I'd already learned what that was. Too many worlds accepted the idea of eating fish before it was cooked. I give my world a point for that. Couldn't get a read on Rick like I wanted. Maybe it was all that bold tomato I don't know why I forgot how to spell tomato. That'd be embarrassing if I was broadcasting that to the world. I couldn't get a read on Rick like I wanted. Maybe it was all that bold tomato sauce churning in my stomach. I was feeling sweaty and fatigued. I was feeling sweaty and fatigued. Still, at my worst, I could read people better than most in any world. Rick seemed to be a believer and a skeptic at the same time. There was no reason for him to believe we were anything other than the kidnappers he thought us to be in the beginning. We could offer him no evidence of our claims without some internal scanner to show all that circuitry inside tray. So he might be pretending to believe, but I read sincerity in his questions and responses too. Okay. He was a man of two minds, and that bothered me a great deal. He might be capable of completely opposite things. Okay, let me separate that because I'm extending this idea a little bit further, so we'll make it its own paragraph. All right. If he turned on us like any sane man in his position should, and dump those notes. Any sane man in his position should, then we were out in the wind again. We would be fleeing authorities in a world ravaged by some virus we had no immunity to. We still had a couple days at best before Trey's metal guts charged up enough to move between worlds again. Then what? Start over again, hiding, stealing, and fleeing. Even in a world that was a plague, there was always worse, sometimes much worse. I looked out the curtain again, but then forced myself to return to the table, looking out a window. Too much was suspicious to. Maybe he hadn't called for help. There was no way we could have known ordering food over his device was a complex process, even with us watching. But here we all were, enjoying the meal. My stomach made another cramping turn, so I stood behind my empty chair, holding on. Evelyn held up a foil dish swimming in butter with twisted pieces of bread soaking in the stuff. I assumed those were the fabled garlic knots. They smelled, let's say they reeked of garlic. Shook my head and waited for the queasiness. Let's fix that. Or the queasiness to pass. All right. Trey had his ragged notebook out. He hardly let either one of us see it, and now he was sharing it with the new guy. Like they were old buddies. He might not say buddies, they were old compatriots. What do all the notations mean? Rick asked. What do all the notations mean? Rick asked. Okay. Trey flipped back. Let's not say back. Trey flipped through a few creased pages. Primal is a world where I don't see any sign of humanity. Sometimes in those worlds I see animals I don't recognize. I try to draw. Say tried. I tried to draw a few of them, but it isn't my strong suit. Most of those worlds have animals that exist in every other world I've seen. Pre-end, post-end. Rick asked. Pre-industrial, post-industrial, and advanced are kind of the general categories I use to describe the basic civilizations I encounter. What about the rest of these? What about the rest of these? Trey turned a couple pages, but didn't seem to be looking at any one entry in particular. I try my best to determine what caused a particular world to be different from mine or others. Sometimes I can figure it out, and other times I'm only guessing before I leave. What does bulk stand for? Trey said balkanized. If the world is broken into smaller countries, especially across what is the United States in our world, in our worlds, I use that descriptor. I think it's OR. Yep. Alright. And coal Shift indicates where or when I believe the diversion in a world's history began. Sometimes it is an era. Col stands for colonial. Other times it is a person. No, not a person. It is a specific event. What have you written for my world? Rick asked. Based on what you've told me, Trey flipped to the newest page, although none of the pages in that notebook could be called new anymore. All right, let me save that. Trey's voice echoed in my head and my vision blurred. My vision blurred, then it cleared up. I held the back of my chair tight and stayed on my feet. Trey ran his finger over the notation. Okay. Oh, it's too long. Okay, that's why it's flipping to the next line. All right, well, that's fine. Okay. Post-industrial, of course. Mill terror indicates terrorist events that occurred. All right, I can do better than this. All right. Terrorist events that occurred between 1999 and the early 2000s. All right. Let's have him say something different. The early aughts. This is the 172nd post-industrial world I've been to, and the 5th world with a defining event with a defining terror event in that time frame. Really? Rick leaned over the notebook with a curiosity that was too genuine. I didn't like it as I wavered on my feet. Okay. It's going all right. Okay, really. All those worlds had a September 11th event, not on the same date, of course, but yes, something significant. And usually the government used the excuse to restrict freedoms. That is far too universal, I'm finding. Bin Laden. I don't know about that spelling, I can check it later. Rick pointed at the notation. That guy was trouble in two worlds. At least, Trey said. At least, Trey said. I'd have to find the other, but he attacked the same World Trade Center with a truck in 2000 in another world. I think he tried that here first, Rick said. I'm not great with history. All right. So what's next? Trey said, this is the third world I've found with a plague in place. What kinds were the other ones? Kinds? What diseases? both flus, as far as I could tell. Both very deadly. I was lucky to get away healthy. Still better than a radiated apocalypse. Aveline said as she bit off a chunk of another garlic knot. I find her beautiful, but her chin was smeared with grease, and I had to look away. You don't... Okay, hold on. What am I missing in their thing there? Alright. You don't have shift listed anywhere for my world, Rick said. I'm not positive, and your world is so close to mine. The shift may have happened after 96, Trey said. Alright. I think we're coming to the end of this chapter, but I'm probably going to have to go into the next chapter to hit my word count today. Alright, I'm not positive, and your world is so close to mine that the shift may have happened after 96, Trey said. What are the two question marks? Climate and phone, Trey said. The biggest differences appear to be different stages of global warming and phone technology started earlier in my world. It's not a solid theory, but that's all I have at the moment. Enough of this chatter, I growled. Everyone stared up at me, and I realized I had spoken aloud. For some reason, I decided to keep going. What message did you send out, and when are the forces coming to collect us? Rick Helms. Rick shook his head and looked at Evelyn and Trey. Don't look to them for help. You look at me. I just ordered food, Patrick. I swear. You watched me do it. I shook my head, and that was a mistake. It came at a price, at a high price of pain. I had to force my eyes open again. I don't know what I saw. If I were you, I would have messaged for help. So when are they coming? No one's coming. Rick whispered, his quiet, mousy voice and weak compliance made me even angrier. If I could have let go of the chair without falling, I would have pulled him to his feet to face me and tell the truth. Alright, maybe we will be able to finish this chapter and hit the word count too. Alright, we'll see. I'm not going to force it longer than it needs to be, but I think we're going to pass 25,000 today, just with this chapter. I would have pulled him to the feet and told me the truth. Evelyn put down her half of a garlic knot and said, Patrick, you need to calm down. Don't tell me what. Even in that state, once I focused on her, I couldn't yell at her, so I turned my attention back onto Rick. Don't tell. What I need is the truth. So answer the question. Answer the question, Rick Helms. I didn't call anyone. I just didn't. Why not? I demanded. Trey and Evelyn both stood as Rick stayed frozen in his chair. My eyes slid closed, but I heard Rick's whispery answer from a great distance. Because I'm scared of you. You look pale, Patrick. Are you okay? Are you well? Evelyn's voice echoed in my head and sounded even further away. I believe I answered her, but I couldn't make out anything I was saying, even in my own head. He's burning up, she said, by my side. I didn't even realize she was touching me until then. I knew we shouldn't have traveled again until he was over the infection. What infection? Rick asked from the other side of this world. Does he have COVID? I let go of the chair with the intention of going after Rick, but I know I hit the floor. I didn't know anything after that. Okay, so we are done with that. So that's chapter 11. So we'll go ahead and set up chapter 12. And we're in the same world, so we'll put that same title back down. Alright, so that puts us at 25,115. So that's where we are with this particular story. Now I'm going to take a look at my NaNoWriMo, and I'm going to update my word count, and I'll see how everybody else is doing. I guess one advantage of going this late into the evening to do my writing is maybe everybody else will have updated too. So first things first, I need to update my word count. So the new word count is 25,115, and I'm very happy with that. Who can't be happy about staying on track? I'm well ahead of the 30-day pace. I'm doing 2,500 a day minimum, so that'll have me finished in 20 days. Finished meaning 50,000 words. I don't know if the novel will be finished then, but we'll see. So let's take a look at some of my buddies here. We'll see kind of where everybody is. All right. Now Jessica McHugh has split her work into 2 novellas. Now she has the first line of the second novella done, and so she has 13 words of the next 25,000. Now, to give her full credit, I believe she may have gone like 30,000 words or more on the previous one, so she's going to blow way past the 50,000 word mark. So excellent work on her part. Now going back to look at some more buddies. Let's see how Armandro's Amelia is doing. Alright, I don't know if he's updated today because I have a terrible memory, but he's at 26,159, and I want to say that's up from yesterday, although he was pretty far along anyway. So he is well past me in the word count mark, so very good job for him. Let's see who else is doing well. John Quick, you can always count on him to have a high number. He is almost at 30,000 words at this point on his horror suspense novel. Let's see who else is moving right along. So let me check this author's word count before I put him up. He still is working on his. See how J.C. Walsh is doing. He's moving right along. He is at 7,014 words, so still putting up word count. Let's see who else. So we checked JC. Alex from Iowa is blowing it away. So he has 19,332 words on his main project, but he's also doing a couple short stories too, so doing great work there. Let's see who else we can check out that is doing NaNoWriMo. Alright, we can look at Tim Meyer, and again he looks like he's updated today. On his monster story, dinosaur story, he is at 32,408 words. So he's going to be well past 50,000 before the end of the month, and he may go a little over. I don't know how long that project is supposed to be. So let's see, who else can we look at today? I only want to look at people who've given me permission. Stephen Kazanewski is at 27,543 words. So doing great. Well on pace. We'll look at a couple more and then we'll call it an evening. Mr. Langliel is at 17,635 on Broken Vistas. I'm curious to see what that novel is about. You try to judge a novel by its title at this point, and then of course the genre that they give you, but that doesn't always tell you a lot. All of these are authors that I really enjoy their work, so I'm curious to see what they end up with. Spiders in the Lattice is what Todd Kiesling's working on, and he's come up with a cover here. I don't know if that's going to be the cover, or if it's just a faux cover for now. It looks pretty good. 21,339, so he's doing great as well. Well on track as we go along. So very proud of everybody.